The search for the lost tomb of Alexander the Great stands as one of history's most compelling and frustrating archaeological quests. Born in 356 BC, Alexander III of Macedon forged an empire stretching from Greece to India, dying unexpectedly in Babylon in 323 BC at the age of 32. His death, shrouded in mystery, attributed variously to fever, poison, or disease, immediately plunged his vast empire into chaos. The immediate fate of his body became the first and most critical point of contention among his successors, the Diadochi, setting the stage for one of history's greatest disappearances. It was widely understood that whoever possessed Alexander's body possessed a potent symbol of legitimacy and divine authority, a relic capable of uniting the fragmented empire. The first documented phase of the body's journey is the most famous. After an initial, complex preparation, likely a process of embalming that could take up to 2 years, possibly using techniques learned from Egyptian or Babylonian experts, Alexander's body was placed in a magnificent golden sarcophagus and a richly decorated, gold-plated carriage or hearse. His appointed regent, Perdiccas, initially intended to transport the body back to Macedon for burial in the traditional royal necropolis at Aegi. However, while the massive funeral procession was en route to Syria in 321 BC, it was intercepted in the Levant by one of Alexander's most ambitious generals, Ptolemy I Soter, the future founder of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. Ptolemy's brazen act of hijacking the royal corpse was a bold political move. He diverted the body to his newly claimed territory, Egypt. By possessing Alexander's remains, Ptolemy effectively claimed the mantle of Alexander's successor in the eyes of the Greek world and the Egyptian populace. This move gave instant, quasi-divine authority to Ptolemy's fledgling dynasty, which would rule Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, until the time of Cleopatra. The body was initially interred in Memphis, the ancient capital of Egypt. This initial tomb was itself likely a grand structure, but it was merely a placeholder for the ultimate, magnificent monument that was to come, firmly establishing the cult of the hero king in Egyptian soil. The diversion of the body to Egypt marked a critical turning point. It solidified Egypt's status as the new intellectual and political center of the Hellenistic world, and fundamentally altered the religious status of Alexander himself. The body was no longer just a royal corpse, it was the sacred relic of a godlike figure, the son of Zeus Ammon, and the physical manifestation of the fusion between Greek and Egyptian power. This political and spiritual theft ensured that the location of the tomb would forever be tied to the power and prosperity of Ptolemy's city, setting the stage for the body's final move to its destined city, Alexandria.
The second and perhaps most glorious resting place for Alexander's body was in the city that bore his name, Alexandria. Ptolemy I Soter eventually moved the remains from the initial temporary tomb in Memphis to a magnificent purpose-built mausoleum in his new capital. This relocation was crucial, elevating Alexandria's status from a burgeoning port city to the undisputed cultural and political epicenter of the Hellenistic world, rivaling Athens and Rome. The site of this ultimate tomb, known as the Sema, meaning sign or tomb in Greek, was located within the heart of the royal quarter of Alexandria. It became the centerpiece of the Ptolemaic dynasty's cult of personality, designed not just as a burial place, but as a powerful, permanent symbol of their divine right to rule Egypt. The accounts of the Sema describe an edifice of staggering wealth and spiritual significance. The tomb was not a simple structure, but a sprawling, lavish complex. Later historical reports indicate that the body was eventually transferred from its original golden sarcophagus into one made of alabaster or translucent glass, possibly due to the need to safeguard the gold during periods of dynastic turmoil or financial strain. Crucially, the body itself was said to be preserved with such skill that it was available for viewing, serving as a powerful, tangible relic for the Hellenistic world. Over the centuries, the Sema became a site of mandatory pilgrimage for prominent figures, including Roman emperors, who sought to pay their respects and draw legitimacy from the greatest conqueror in history. Among the most famous accounts of these visits is that of Julius Caesar and, most notably, Octavian, later Emperor Augustus. In 30 BC, following his conquest of Egypt and the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Octavian visited the tomb. Historical accounts by Suetonius and Dio Cassius detail this significant pilgrimage. Octavian is said to have gazed upon Alexander's face, touching his preserved nose, which was reputedly damaged in the process, an anecdote highlighting the extraordinary nature of the body's visibility. Octavian famously refused to visit the tombs of the Ptolemies, stating he came to see a king, not corpses, a remark that cemented Alexander's unique, immortal status in Roman imperial ideology. This visit proves definitively that the tomb was still intact and accessible at the very beginning of the Roman era. The tomb remained a major landmark for at least 3 centuries into the Roman imperial period. Subsequent visits were recorded, including one by Emperor Caligula, who allegedly stole Alexander's breastplate for his own use, and Emperor Septimius Severus in the 3rd century AD. Severus, in an effort to maintain the sanctity of the site, reportedly sealed the tomb's inner chamber and removed all the texts and secret books that were kept there, to prevent the unauthorized viewing of the contents and to protect the secrets of the ancient kings. This act, while meant to preserve the Sema, marks the last reliable recorded testimony of a major historical figure visiting and interacting with the sealed tomb. Following this era, the trail of the magnificent Sema and the body it housed begins to fade dramatically into historical obscurity, marking the beginning of the great archaeological void.
The slow, irreversible decline in the knowledge of Alexander's tomb's location accelerated rapidly after the 3rd century AD. Several factors contributed to this sudden historical blackout, transforming the Sema from a global landmark into a ghost of Alexandria's past. Chief among these was the rise of Christianity and the subsequent decline of pagan cults. As the Roman Empire embraced Christianity, the veneration of pagan heroes and semi-divine figures like Alexander became discouraged, leading to a deliberate neglect of the structures associated with the old gods and kings. The cult of Alexander waned, and the political necessity of maintaining his tomb as a symbol of dynastic power vanished. Simultaneously, the city of Alexandria itself began to suffer catastrophic decline. The city was repeatedly devastated by natural disasters, notably a series of powerful earthquakes and subsequent tsunamis starting in the 4th century AD. The most famous was the massive earthquake of 365 AD, which crippled the city and likely caused significant damage to the royal quarter, where the Sema was located. Subsequent destruction and rebuilding often failed to prioritize the preservation of ancient pagan sites. Furthermore, social and religious unrest, including anti-pagan riots and the destruction of temples and monuments, swept through the city, potentially leading to the deliberate dismantling or covering up of structures like the Sema, which represented the old, contested order. By the time the Arab conquest swept through Egypt in the 7th century AD, the location of the tomb was either completely lost to the memory of the common populace or deliberately obscured by Christian authorities. Arab historians, while writing extensively about the wonders of Alexandria, often noted the legendary status of the tomb but were vague about its exact location. Figures like Ibn Abd al-Hakam, 9th century, and Leo Africanus, 16th century,
mention the tomb, sometimes placing it in a specific mosque or shrine, but their accounts were largely based on hearsay and conflicting local legends, rather than direct observation. The name given to the tomb in Arabic sources was often Iskandar's Kuba, Dome of Alexander, or simply Al-Jamia al-Iskandari, Alexander's mosque or shrine, indicating that its memory persisted, but its precise physical identity was subsumed by newer religious architecture. The critical void in knowledge spans the period between Emperor Septimius Severus's visit in 215 AD and the High Medieval era. It is during these 4 centuries of natural disaster, political upheaval, and religious transition that the actual structure of the Sema disappeared beneath the accumulating debris of history. Historians now grapple with 2 primary possibilities. Either the tomb was irrevocably destroyed by earthquakes and its remains scattered or scavenged, or more tantalizingly, it was deliberately concealed and buried intact beneath newer construction to protect it from Christian zealots or looters, a scenario that fuels modern archaeological hope. The search today is complicated by the fact that the ancient royal quarter of Alexandria now lies beneath the densely populated modern city, making large-scale excavation virtually impossible.
The modern search for Alexander's tomb is a complex amalgamation of historical sleuthing, geological surveys, and competing theories, both academic and amateur. The vast majority of mainstream archaeological research focuses on the traditional and most probable location, the ancient royal quarter or Bruchium of Alexandria. Unfortunately, this area now lies beneath the modern city center, making extensive digging impractical and politically sensitive. Early 20th century attempts were often haphazard, involving small, localized digs that were frequently thwarted by high water tables and the dense overlay of subsequent urban development. The deep layers of historical occupation in Alexandria mean the Soma could be buried dozens of meters beneath modern street level. One of the most enduring and controversial theories posits that the tomb was never truly lost, but was misidentified or deliberately relocated during the late Roman or early Christian periods. Some researchers suggest that the body was moved from Alexandria to a safer location. One prominent alternative location theory focuses on the Siwa oasis in the western desert of Egypt. Alexander famously made a pilgrimage to Siwa to consult the oracle of Amun, who supposedly confirmed his divine parentage. Since the oracle held deep personal and spiritual significance for Alexander, some argue that he may have secretly requested to be buried near the oracle, far from the political turmoil of the capital. Although compellingly romantic, solid archaeological evidence supporting a Siwa burial remains absent, leaving it largely within the realm of speculation. Another set of theories places the tomb outside of Egypt entirely. One persistent claim, known as the Venetian theory, suggests that the remains are actually those of St. Mark the Evangelist, whose relics were notoriously stolen from Alexandria by Venetian merchants in 828 AD and are now housed in St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. The theory posits that the medieval Christians, seeking to protect a relic of enormous power, conflated or deliberately replaced Alexander's remains with those of St. Mark, or that the Venetians inadvertently stole Alexander's body, mistaking it for the saints, or even understanding what they had due to the confusing nature of the sealed Soma. However, this theory is challenged by strong evidence that the relics in Venice are genuinely those of St. Mark. The primary difficulty in resolving the tomb's location lies not only in the urban density, but in the fundamental nature of the evidence. Modern searches often rely on ground-penetrating radar, GPR, and sophisticated magnetometry to map subterranean anomalies. Several intriguing underground structures have been detected in various parts of modern Alexandria, including the area of the Nebi Daniel Mosque, a traditional but unverified proposed location.
Yet translating these non-invasive geophysical signals into conclusive proof remains the ultimate hurdle. The search requires a lucky combination of political will, massive funding, and a fortuitous, accessible anomaly that can be definitively linked to the descriptions of the magnificent Soma.
The architectural descriptions of the Sema, or the tomb complex in Alexandria, provide crucial clues and simultaneously significant confusion to modern researchers. The term Sema suggests a monumental structure that was visible and prominent, a deliberate sign or marker within the urban landscape. It was consistently described as a temple-like mausoleum, likely modeled after Greek or Macedonian Heroa rather than a typical Egyptian tomb. The tomb was likely not a simple underground burial chamber, but a towering, visible shrine that served as the center for the cult of Alexander the Great. This cult was vital to the Ptolemies, who deified Alexander, often depicting him with the ram's horns of the Egyptian god Amun, symbolizing his divine heritage. A key piece of evidence, often cited by researchers, is the historical context of the Sema's eventual location within the royal quarter. Early descriptions suggest that Alexander's tomb was placed near the city's main intersection and possibly adjacent to the body of his original successor, Ptolemy I Soter, who later chose to be buried nearby. This juxtaposition of the founder of the dynasty with its divine inspiration was a clear statement of succession and legitimacy. Following the establishment of the Sema, the entire royal burial ground of the Ptolemies became known as the Ptolemaion, of which Alexander's tomb was the most sacred element. Identifying the precise footprint of the Ptolemaion could theoretically lead to the Sema. However, the layout of the ancient royal quarter is itself heavily disputed, having been largely obscured by subsequent Hellenistic, Roman, and Byzantine construction. Much of the evidence for the royal quarter's location comes from fragmented maps and conflicting accounts from travelers and geographers like Strabo. For decades, the area around the modern Nebi Daniel Mosque has been a focus, largely because medieval Arab sources often referred to a burial site of a great figure, sometimes identified as Alexander, within that general vicinity. Excavations beneath the mosque in the early 20th century failed to yield conclusive evidence, but tantalizingly reported subterranean vaults, suggesting deep, complex, and potentially untouched structures beneath the site. The possibility of looting and physical destruction of the body itself cannot be dismissed. While Octavian and Severus saw the body intact, the intervening centuries saw periods of extreme anarchy in Alexandria. The golden sarcophagus was reportedly melted down by Ptolemy X Lathyrus for coinage, an act that points to the vulnerability of the tomb's treasures. After Severus sealed the inner sanctum, there is no guarantee that subsequent looters, driven by religious fervor or greed, did not find ways to breach the sealed chamber. If the tomb was successfully looted and the remains dispersed, the search becomes one for an empty, ruined monument, significantly lowering the chance of finding the ultimate prize, the preserved body of the legendary conqueror.
The persistent nature of the quest for Alexander's tomb has led to a fascinating series of archaeological expeditions focused outside of Alexandria. One particularly enduring theory centers on Amphipolis in northern Greece, Alexander's homeland. In 2014, a massive, highly significant tomb complex was discovered there, dating to the late 4th century BC, precisely the time of Alexander's successors. The scale and richness of the discovery were breathtaking, featuring a colossal marble sphinx, 2 stunning caryatids, sculpted female figures, and magnificent mosaic floors. The sheer size of the complex, the largest ancient tomb ever discovered in Greece, immediately fueled global speculation that it could be the resting place of Alexander himself, or perhaps his immediate family, his wife Roxana, his young son Alexander IV, or even his mother Olympias. However, detailed archaeological work and subsequent analysis revealed that the Amphipolis tomb, while incredibly important, was not Alexander's final resting place. The presence of a skeletonized body, later identified as a woman of high status, possibly accompanied by other remains, ruled out the great conqueror. Yet the discovery was crucial because it demonstrated the immense lengths to which Alexander's immediate successors went to construct magnificent burial monuments, often involving the deliberate obscuring of the identity of the occupants for political safety. The deliberate sealing of the Amphipolis tomb, which was later broken into and partly looted, shows that secrecy and security were paramount concerns for the Diadochi, a practice that likely contributed to the eventual disappearance of Alexander's own Soma. The Macedonian theory continues to hold sway with some historians, arguing that, despite Ptolemy's initial theft, the Macedonians eventually succeeded in retrieving the body, or more likely, a substitute body, and interred it in the royal necropolis at Aigai, modern Vergina, where Alexander's father, Philip II, was buried. While the lavish tombs at Vergina, discovered in the 1970s by Manolis Andronikos, were undoubtedly those of Macedonian royalty, they predate Alexander's death, ruling out his primary burial there. Nonetheless, the ongoing efforts by Greek archaeologists underscore the national pride attached to locating the tomb in its homeland. The discovery of Amphipolis, though not Alexander's, profoundly deepened our understanding of the monumental burial architecture of the early Hellenistic period, providing a valuable comparative framework for what the Alexandrian Soma might have looked like. Ultimately, the failure of these major alternative site excavations to yield Alexander's remains only strengthens the consensus that the body is indeed located somewhere beneath the modern chaos of Alexandria. The search has become less about where and more about how to access the deeply buried, intact ancient royal quarter without destroying the fabric of the modern city. A logistical and political challenge that has proven to be the most formidable successor Alexander's memory has ever faced.
The challenge of locating the Sema is compounded by the sheer destruction and rebuilding that has characterized Alexandria's history, essentially turning the ancient city into a multi-layered archaeological lasagna. Unlike sites that were simply abandoned, like Petra or Machu Picchu, Alexandria has been continuously inhabited and built upon for over 2 millennia. Furthermore, a significant portion of the ancient city, including much of the Ptolemaic royal quarter, has sunk beneath the modern harbor due to subsidence and the great earthquake of 365 AD. This has led to the development of underwater archaeology as a vital component of the search. Since the 1990s, archaeological teams, most notably those led by Franck Gaudio, have mapped and recovered thousands of artifacts from the submerged ruins of the ancient harbor, particularly around the island of Anti-Rhodos, where Ptolemaic palaces were located. While these underwater excavations have unearthed monumental statuary, sphinxes, and palace architecture that confirm the immense wealth and luxury of the royal quarter, they have not yet yielded the Sema itself. The possibility remains that the tomb, being a heavy monumental structure, resisted complete submersion and may lie intact beneath the harbor seabed, protected by the dense silt. However, current consensus suggests that the main Sema structure was located inland, meaning the search must continue beneath the modern city streets. The focus of the land-based search often returns to the area around the tomb of Nebi Daniel. Medieval Arabic sources, particularly the 15th century traveler Leo Africanus, reported seeing a small building that locals claimed housed the tomb of Iskandar near the site of the present-day mosque. These accounts describe a chamber covered in Arabic inscriptions and containing objects purported to be relics of Alexander. While these descriptions are tantalizing, the problem lies in the high probability of misattribution. It was common practice for local residents, particularly after the Christianization and Arabization of the city, to re-identify important pagan sites or tombs with figures from the new religions to ensure their protection and continued reverence. Thus, the figure buried at the Nebi Daniel site could easily be an anonymous Ptolemaic official
or an early Christian saint, whose tomb was mistakenly or intentionally given Alexander's identity. The technological solution to this dilemma remains the use of non-invasive imaging. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, and magnetometry surveys are constantly being refined, allowing archaeologists to see through layers of modern concrete and ancient fill. These surveys have identified several large, deep, tunnel-like structures and monumental chambers in the dense urban core that warrant further investigation. The hope is that one of these subterranean anomalies, which defy standard urban architecture, will eventually correlate with the dimensions and descriptions of the lost, sealed Sema complex, offering the definitive target for a highly challenging, deep-level excavation.
One of the greatest unresolved questions surrounding Alexander's burial concerns the fate of the original golden sarcophagus. Historical accounts are clear. The body was first placed in a magnificent coffin crafted entirely of gold. Accounts indicate that sometime during the turbulent reign of Ptolemy X Lathyrus, around 100 BC, this golden sarcophagus was melted down to provide coinage for his treasury. This act underscores the financial desperation and political instability of the later Ptolemaic era, and demonstrates the extreme vulnerability of the tomb's treasures. Upon the destruction of the golden sarcophagus, the body was reportedly transferred to a new receptacle, usually described as made of glass or alabaster or crystal. This shift in material is highly significant for modern researchers. The alabaster or glass sarcophagus was likely translucent, which would have allowed visitors like Octavian and Septimius Severus to clearly view the preserved remains, thus sustaining the powerful visual cult of the dead king. However, a container made of glass or alabaster is far less resistant to looting or destruction than the original metal one. If the tomb was severely damaged by the earthquakes of the 4th century AD, the fragile glass container might have been shattered, scattering the already fragile, embalmed remains and potentially rendering them unrecognizable or mixing them with other funerary debris. This possibility darkens the prospect of finding a perfectly preserved body. The method used for embalming Alexander's body is also a key part of the mystery. While the early Ptolemies would have had access to advanced Egyptian mummification techniques, the haste and specific context of Alexander's death in Babylon suggest a unique process. Reports describe the body being coated in honey or resin, which would aid preservation and provide an aromatic quality suitable for a divine king. Unlike Egyptian mummies, which were often bound and highly stylized, Alexander's body was reputedly displayed uncovered, suggesting a different, more Greek heroic preservation technique aimed at maintaining a lifelike appearance. Scientific analysis of any potential remains would need to look for non-traditional embalming materials, such as specific resins or oils, rather than the natron salts typical of standard Egyptian practice. Furthermore, the curse associated with disturbing royal tombs in Egypt adds a layer of cultural complexity to the modern search. Although Alexander was a Greek king, his remains lay in Egypt for centuries, subject to the same spiritual beliefs regarding the sanctity of burial. The stories of curses surrounding the tombs of pharaohs, while often sensationalized, reflect a genuine reverence for the deceased and a warning against desecration. This cultural background subtly influences the delicate political negotiations required to gain permission for deep, intrusive excavation beneath the modern city, reminding researchers that they are seeking not just a historical artifact, but the sacred, long-protected body of a man once worshipped as a god.
The political environment surrounding the search for Alexander's tomb remains a significant, often overlooked hurdle. Any large-scale excavation in modern Alexandria would require massive investment, complex engineering to stabilize surrounding structures, and, most critically, unprecedented political cooperation from the Egyptian government and local community leaders. The area beneath which the Sema is most likely buried is now a densely populated urban center, featuring mosques, Coptic churches, and residential buildings. A major archaeological dig would necessitate displacing thousands of people and potentially dismantling sacred modern structures, making the effort politically perilous and unpopular. This political complexity has often pushed the search towards fringe locations or limited, non-intrusive surveys. For decades, various self-proclaimed archaeologists and historians have claimed to have found the tomb in locations ranging from the crypt of an ancient church in Ravenna, Italy, to a ruin in Uzbekistan. While these claims are frequently sensationalized and lack peer-reviewed evidence, they serve to illustrate the enduring human fascination with Alexander and the desperate desire for a simple solution to the historical puzzle. The most recent, highly publicized yet ultimately unsubstantiated claim involved a site in the center of modern Alexandria near a railway station, where an archaeologist detected a large underground structure, leading to brief, intense speculation before the structure was found to be Roman-era cisterns. The curse of legitimacy also plays a role in the modern context. Just as Ptolemy used the body for political validation, the discovery of the tomb today would carry immense political and cultural significance. For Egypt, it would cement Alexandria's status as a top historical destination, potentially generating enormous economic returns. For Greece and North Macedonia, there would be immediate, potentially heated custodial disputes over the ownership of the remains. The international legal and cultural wrangling over the final resting place of Alexander, whether his body should remain in Egypt, where it lay for centuries, or be returned to his Macedonian homeland, would be a geopolitical event of massive proportions, which may, ironically, contribute to the reluctance of major international bodies to pursue the search aggressively. Ultimately, the most realistic hope for solving the mystery lies in a combination of advanced, non-invasive technology and extreme luck. Continued GPR and seismic imaging surveys, coupled with the slow, controlled expansion of utility and construction projects in the older sections of Alexandria, offer the best chance of accidentally exposing a previously undetected monumental structure that correlates with the historical descriptions of the Sema. Until then, Alexander's body remains the ultimate ghost in the machine of archaeology, the proof of an empire hidden beneath the foundations of the modern world.
The focus on the body's eventual resting place often overshadows the initial, crucial journey from Babylon and the profound engineering feat of the original funeral procession. The historian Diodorus Siculus described the hearse as a massive, elaborate affair, a moving temple, not just a carriage. It was drawn by 64 mules, required a massive retinue to manage, and was adorned with sculpted golden figures of battle scenes, a victory wreath, and a canopy draped in purple and gold. This entire creation was a deliberate piece of propaganda designed to project Alexander's divine status and the legitimacy of his designated successor, Perdiccas, who commissioned it. When Ptolemy I Soter hijacked this procession, he seized not just the body, but this priceless symbol of authority, integrating its divine aura into his own claim over Egypt. The strategic importance of this funeral carriage and its immense value suggests that it was likely preserved, at least initially, by Ptolemy. It is possible that elements of the carriage, such as the massive golden wheels or the sculpted friezes, were dismantled and used as foundation material or decorative elements within the permanent Sema structure in Alexandria. If so, finding fragments of the original carriage could serve as an important archaeological marker, confirming proximity to the main tomb complex. Researchers often search for materials that deviate from typical Alexandrian building stock, hoping to find the rich, imported materials like purple wood or gold accents that were used in the original funerary display. The shift of the body from the golden sarcophagus to the glass alabaster sarcophagus is often interpreted as a necessary consequence of Ptolemaic financial hardship,
However, it also represents a powerful spiritual and artistic decision. The desire to display the perfectly preserved body of the God-King in a transparent container speaks to the unique nature of the Macedonian hero cult, which prioritized visual access to the relic. This visual availability turned the Sema into a living, tangible museum dedicated to Alexander's glory, unlike the sealed tombs of Egyptian pharaohs. The glass sarcophagus elevated the experience, presenting the conqueror as an immortal, untouchable figure, visible to the faithful but protected by the transparent barrier. This specific requirement, a viewing chamber, is a key detail that could distinguish the Sema from standard Ptolemaic tombs should an unlooted structure be discovered. The continuing, passionate, albeit sometimes chaotic search for Alexander's tomb underscores the profound impact of a single historical figure whose material legacy remains contested. The tomb is more than just a burial site. It is a missing linchpin in the history of the Hellenistic world and a perpetual test of the limits of modern archaeological technology against the ravages of time, urban sprawl, and ancient geopolitical intrigue.
The search for the Sema has been indirectly aided by the discovery of other royal burials in the Titicaca region, on the other side of the world, which highlight the common practice of false burials and royal body displacement in antiquity. However, closer to the actual events, the fate of Alexander's immediate family offers a chilling parallel. His wife, Roxana, and his legitimate heir, Alexander IV, were both murdered by Cassander in 310 BC. Their remains were likely interred in Macedonia, but their deaths were essential to the final partitioning of the empire and the political legitimization of the remaining Diadochi, including Ptolemy. The murder of the rightful heir made the possession of the founder's body, Alexander the Great, even more critical as the sole symbol of imperial authority. The deliberate secrecy and subsequent confusion surrounding the Sema might have been a protective measure rooted in the political paranoia of the early Ptolemaic dynasty. Ptolemy I Soter knew his claim to Egypt was based largely on the perceived divinity of his patron, Alexander. To protect this sacred source of legitimacy from rivals and potential desecrators, the tomb may have been surrounded by misleading inscriptions, false entrances, or decoy structures. This tactic would have ensured that only the reigning Ptolemaic king and his most trusted priests knew the true location and access protocols of the inner sanctum. This level of intentional obfuscation explains why the tomb remained accessible for the first few centuries, but then vanished so completely from the public record after the 3rd century AD. The secret simply died with the last initiated keepers. Furthermore, a significant archaeological clue lies in the structure of the ancient Alexandrian street grid. The Sema was reportedly located near the city's central artery or main north-south road, the Canopic Street or Platea. Ancient urban planning often placed the most significant religious and royal structures at key intersections or along primary axes. By using early maps and modern geophysical surveys to precisely trace the original routes of Alexandria's central street grid, researchers hope to narrow the search area to specific historically significant intersections within the modern city. The challenge, however, is that this entire grid is now buried deep beneath the urban fabric, and subtle shifts in the land due to seismic activity may have slightly altered the original coordinates. The most exciting prospects for the future of the search involve a deeper commitment to non-invasive 3D mapping of the subsurface. Combining GPR, electrical resistivity tomography, and seismic refraction methods can create a comprehensive, layered map of the ancient city without turning a single shovel. The identification of a colossal, deep, non-standard rectangular structure with the characteristics of a Heroan within the predicted coordinates of the royal quarter would represent the definitive breakthrough, transitioning the quest for Alexander's tomb from theoretical historical debate to a tangible archaeological expedition of a lifetime.
The religious syncretism that characterized Alexander's life and death is paramount to understanding the enigma of his tomb. Alexander actively cultivated his image as a divine figure, the son of Zeus Ammon, a fusion of the Greek supreme god and the Egyptian deity. This deliberate merging of pantheons meant that his tomb, the Sema, served a dual function. It was a Greek heroine, a shrine dedicated to a deified hero, and an Egyptian-style funerary temple. This hybrid nature is key. Unlike purely Greek tombs, the Sema likely incorporated subterranean elements, perhaps resembling a classical Egyptian crypt beneath a towering Greek Macedonian superstructure. This complexity could explain why the tomb survived the early phase of Christian purges. Its unique, composite architecture may have confused or deterred early Christian zealots who were primarily focused on destroying traditional pagan temples. The specific architecture of the Sema might have included a vaulted chamber or hypogeum designed to protect the body from flooding, given Alexandria's low elevation and high water table. If the inner tomb chamber utilized waterproof construction techniques similar to those found in Roman cisterns in the area, the body could still be intact even if the grand structure above it was destroyed by seismic activity. This possibility, a deep, well-preserved inner crypt, is what motivates archaeologists to focus on deep-level anomalies detected by GPR. The theory of a submerged or subterranean preservation system is further supported by the need to maintain the body's integrity for centuries, requiring environmental controls that only a carefully engineered hypogeum could provide. The historical accounts mentioning Emperor Septimius Severus sealing the inner chamber and removing the secret books offer another vital clue. The books were likely ritualistic texts, astronomical charts, or perhaps even detailed plans of the Ptolemaic dynasty, reinforcing the idea that the Sema was a repository of secret knowledge, not just a tomb. Severus's motivation to remove them was to prevent their secrets from falling into the wrong hands, possibly suggesting that the texts contained information politically or esoterically sensitive enough to destabilize the empire. The act of sealing the inner sanctum, recorded in the early 3rd century AD, confirms that the body was safe and the location was known at that late date. The sudden subsequent disappearance implies that the keepers of the tomb, the secret religious order or priesthood, either fled, died, or were eliminated shortly after Severus's departure, allowing the tomb to become a silent victim of the great civil and religious turmoil that followed. The continuing failure to find the Sema thus represents a failure to penetrate the historical fog intentionally created by the tomb's protectors. The lost key is the knowledge held by the final priesthood, knowledge that was likely never written down after Severus removed the written archives, leaving only vague, easily dismissed local legends as our guide. The discovery will not just be about finding a body, but about locating the final, magnificent act of secrecy in the ancient world.
The identity of Alexander the Great became inextricably linked with the Serapis cult in Alexandria, a religious fusion engineered by Ptolemy I Soter himself. Serapis was a composite deity, blending the attributes of the Egyptian god Osiris, associated with the afterlife and resurrection, and the Greek gods Zeus and Hades. This new god was specifically designed to be acceptable to both the native Egyptian population and the Greek settlers, reinforcing the syncretic nature of Ptolemaic rule. The temple dedicated to this god, the Serapeum, became one of Alexandria's most magnificent structures, second only to the Pharos lighthouse. Some scholars propose a radical theory that the Sema, Alexander's tomb, was not merely located near the Serapeum, but was perhaps integrated into the Serapeum complex itself, or deliberately placed in a hypogeum, subterranean vault, beneath it. This theory gains traction when considering the immense size and spiritual significance of the Serapeum. If Alexander's remains were housed beneath the temple of Serapis, it would have symbolically cemented his role as the divine predecessor to the new god,
or perhaps even as a manifestation of Serapis himself. This integration would have provided an extra layer of protection, as the Serapeum, though eventually destroyed in the late 4th century AD during Christian unrest, was guarded and venerated for centuries. Finding the foundations of the original Serapeum and exploring its deep substructures could potentially lead to the highly protected Sema. The catastrophic events that led to the destruction of the Serapeum in 391 AD are well documented. Bishop Theophilus of Alexandria led the charge against the pagan sanctuary, a moment often cited as the symbolic death knell for the city's ancient intellectual and pagan heritage. If Alexander's tomb was indeed nearby or integrated into the complex, it would have been heavily targeted for destruction, or, conversely, was perhaps the reason for the secrecy surrounding the Serapeum's deepest vaults. The possibility exists that the pagan priests, foreseeing the inevitable destruction, moved Alexander's body from the Sema into a safer, secret hiding place within the Serapeum's vast underground network, only for that entire network to be lost after the temple's destruction. The current archaeological search, though difficult, does target areas associated with the Serapeum, which is traditionally located in the southwestern quadrant of the ancient city. Excavations have revealed the Serapeum's impressive supporting walls and columns, but definitive proof of the Sema's integration remains elusive. The persistent idea that the body was moved into a highly protected, yet ultimately sealed and forgotten space due to religious persecution remains one of the strongest working theories for its total disappearance from history. The tomb is not lost to chance, but hidden by faith and fear.
The search for Alexander's tomb often returns to the question of authenticity and substitution. Given the political turmoil following his death, some historians entertain the radical possibility that the body interred in Alexandria for centuries was not the real Alexander. The intense political rivalry among the Diadochi meant that forging a powerful relic to legitimize a new ruler was a plausible tactic. Perdiccas, the original regent, was transporting the body. Ptolemy hijacked it. It is entirely possible that Perdiccas, foreseeing the inevitable confrontation, switched Alexander's body with that of a substitute, allowing the substitute to be hijacked while the real Alexander was secretly buried elsewhere, perhaps in a hidden small tomb in Macedon or even back in Babylon. However, this theory faces a major challenge. The consistent historical accounts from figures like Octavian and Severus, who paid homage to the visible and preserved body. The identity of the body, which was often viewed by emperors, would have had to be convincingly authentic to the most powerful men of the Roman world for over 3 centuries. If a switch occurred, it must have happened either during the initial chaotic embalming in Babylon or immediately upon the body's arrival in Memphis, before its divine status was fully established and verified by the Ptolemies themselves. The Babylonian death site also represents a geographically distinct, yet historically significant alternative. Alexander died in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar II in Babylon. While the body was certainly moved, some local legends suggest that the funeral procession was intercepted and turned back, and that Alexander was secretly interred in an elaborate, unlooted tomb within the vast ruins of the Babylonian city. The region's archaeological record is far less explored than Egypt's, and the discovery of a magnificent Macedonian-style tomb in modern-day Iraq could completely rewrite the history of the body's journey. However, the overwhelming weight of historical evidence points to Egypt as the final destination of the Diadochi's prized relic. The primary archaeological frustration in Alexandria today is the high water table and urban decay. Since ancient Alexandria lies just above sea level,
Excavations rapidly encounter groundwater, which complicates deep digging and threatens the integrity of any organic material discovered. Furthermore, the modern city is plagued by aging infrastructure, meaning any deep dig risks destabilizing ancient subterranean walls and Roman-era cisterns, potentially leading to the collapse of modern buildings. This structural and hydrological reality means that the excavation of the Sema will likely require novel, multi-million-dollar cofferdam or dewatering technology, a level of engineering investment usually reserved for major infrastructure projects, not archaeology.
The mystery surrounding the tomb is fundamentally tied to the concept of the Theos Euergetes, God the benefactor, the royal cult that the Ptolemies established around Alexander. The Sema was not a simple tomb, it was a center for this civic religion designed to reinforce the legitimacy and divine mandate of the ruling dynasty. For the first 2 centuries of the Ptolemaic kingdom, the priests of the Sema were powerful political figures, meticulously maintaining the tomb's security and the visible cult of the dead king. This royal dedication meant that the tomb was constantly being renovated, embellished, and possibly moved slightly within the royal quarter to suit the architectural needs of subsequent Ptolemies. This potential minor relocation within the quarter further complicates the modern search, as the Sema may refer to a sequence of burial structures over time, rather than a single static location. The collapse of the Ptolemaic dynasty with the defeat of Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony in 30 BC was a pivotal moment. While Octavian, Augustus, visited the tomb shortly after, the Sema lost its central dynastic purpose. Under Roman rule, Alexander's tomb transitioned from a symbol of a living dynasty to a historical relic and a symbol of Roman imperial power that sought to associate itself with Alexander's unparalleled military glory. The shift was subtle but significant. The tomb was now venerated for its historical weight, not its religious necessity. This change in focus may have made the site less zealously protected, paving the way for the sealing by Septimius Severus and the eventual loss of location. A highly specialized academic theory suggests that the body may have been secured not in a tomb, but in a funerary treasury or thesaurus. Given the immense value of the original golden sarcophagus and the subsequent display of wealth in the Sema, the inner chamber may have been designed more like a highly secure bank vault than a traditional burial crypt. This would explain the secrecy and the reports of associated books and treasures that Severus removed. Such a subterranean treasury would be constructed with extreme solidity and be less likely to have been utterly destroyed by earthquakes than the surface structures. Finding a massive, non-standard Roman-era thesaurus located deep beneath the city would be a significant indicator that the archaeological target is the Sema's true inner sanctum. The ongoing search is fueled by the tantalizing possibility of finding the body preserved enough for DNA analysis. If Alexander's remains are ever located, scientific testing could confirm his parentage, potentially resolving ancient debates about his lineage, and even shedding light on his cause of death, for example through toxicological or skeletal analysis. This potential for resolving 2 millennia of historical ambiguity is the ultimate non-political prize that keeps archaeologists and adventurers alike focused on the buried layers of ancient Alexandria. The historical ambiguity surrounding the tomb's final resting place is deliberately perpetuated by conflicting accounts from later antiquity. One intriguing set of references comes from the early Byzantine period, 4th to 6th centuries AD. Some texts hint that the body was moved from Alexandria and taken to Antioch, modern Antakya, Turkey. This theory posits that as Alexandria descended into religious turmoil and suffered catastrophic natural disasters, Christian or pagan factions with control over the remains sought a safer, more stable imperial city for its final, protected internment. Antioch, being a major center of Roman power, offered a secure alternative. If this move occurred, it would have been executed under the utmost secrecy to avoid political backlash and looting. The Antioch theory, though lacking definitive archaeological proof, relies on the political logic of the time. Moving such a potent relic to the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire
would have maintained its symbolic power for the imperial authority, ensuring that the legacy of Alexander remained tied to the Roman state, rather than being destroyed by local religious strife. The search would then shift to the deep, unexcavated layers beneath modern Antakya, which itself is a multi-layered city built atop millennia of history. This possibility, however, is generally viewed as less likely than the body remaining sealed beneath Alexandria, primarily because the Roman emperors consistently paid pilgrimage to Alexandria, suggesting the body was still there during the early imperial period. A key difficulty in all geographic theories is the challenge of distinguishing Alexander's tomb from a cenotaph, an empty tomb or monument dedicated to the deceased. It was a common practice in the Roman and Hellenistic worlds to erect multiple monuments to important figures. Given Alexander's immense status, it is highly likely that there were several hiroa or shrines dedicated to him across his empire. The tomb discovered in Siwa, or the subterranean structure beneath a mosque, might not be the actual Sema containing the body, but merely a cenotaph or a memorial shrine established to honor his memory in a specific location. Modern archaeology must therefore seek not just a monumental tomb structure, but one that contained the specific, valuable artifacts and, ideally, the body mentioned in the accounts of Octavian and Severus. The modern search, thus, functions as a powerful cultural magnet, attracting funding and media attention through the sheer magnitude of the historical figure involved. This has spurred the development of advanced remote sensing techniques, turning the hunt for the Sema into a laboratory for urban archaeology. The ultimate discovery will require not just a lucky find, but the successful application of technology capable of peeling back 2,000 years of urban development, revealing the sacred foundations of the Hellenistic world.
The question of Macedonian royal burial tradition offers further insight into the likely structure and security of the Sema. Macedonian kings, unlike the Egyptians, favored burial in monumental stone tumuli, often containing multiple chambers, such as those famously found at Vergina, ancient Ai. While Alexander's final tomb was in Egypt, it was built by a Macedonian king, Ptolemy I Soter, for a Macedonian deity hero. Therefore, the Sema was likely a fusion, a Hellenistic, multi-chambered stone structure designed to endure, situated within a broader Ptolemaic religious complex. Its security would have relied less on Egyptian curses and more on robust, fortress-like construction and deliberate concealment of the access points. This strong Macedonian influence suggests that the inner chamber of the Sema might have contained more than just the body and the sarcophagus. Macedonian royal tombs were packed with immense personal wealth, including gold artifacts, weaponry, and unique burial goods designed to accompany the king into the afterlife. The golden sarcophagus may have been melted down, but the chamber would still likely house a vast array of undiscovered treasures, including Alexander's personal armor, weaponry, or perhaps the diadem he wore. The existence of these undisturbed funerary riches is a key element of the current archaeological fantasy, as an unlooted Sema would offer an unparalleled glimpse into the private life and material culture of the greatest general in history. The historical accounts also hint at the public relations purpose of the tomb's architecture. The fact that the body was viewable underscores the Ptolemies' need to continually legitimize their rule to both their Greek and Roman visitors. The Sema was essentially a political theater, a highly controlled environment designed to inspire awe and reinforce the notion that the Ptolemies were the rightful successors to Alexander's divine mandate. The chamber may have been designed with specific lighting or ritualistic elements intended to enhance the visual impact of the preserved body, possibly utilizing advanced Alexandrian optics or mechanics, giving the viewing a quasi-miraculous quality. The challenge of the search is therefore magnified by the necessity of differentiating between a grand but standard Ptolemaic burial and the unique theatrical majesty of the Sema.
The discovery of extraordinary size, multiple chambers, and high-quality Macedonian artifacts, coupled with evidence of a viewing platform or complex access system, would be the definitive proof required to confidently declare the discovery of the resting place of Alexander the Great. Until such a find is made, the tomb remains the single largest and most tantalizing missing piece of the Hellenistic world's puzzle.
The relentless pursuit of Alexander's tomb has invariably led to a debate over the very definition of discovery in a site as historically dense as Alexandria. For many, finding the Sema is not enough. The discovery must include the preserved body of the conqueror. This focus places immense pressure on modern archaeologists, requiring not just the location of a building, but the pinpointing of an unlooted, structurally protected inner chamber. This task is made exponentially harder by the established fact that the gold sarcophagus was destroyed, and the protective context of the original royal cult dissolved over centuries of political and religious upheaval. The body, even if found, may not be in the perfectly preserved, viewable state witnessed by Roman emperors, but rather a collection of fragile, possibly intermingled remains within a damaged alabaster container. The concept of relic movement must be seriously considered. Throughout the medieval period, the movement of powerful saintly relics was common practice, often undertaken to protect the remains from invaders or to enhance the spiritual status of a new location. If the body was moved from Alexandria to Antioch, or even further to places rumored in later centuries like Venice, as part of the St. Mark confusion, or even back toward Macedonia, the tomb in Alexandria might be a genuine yet empty structure. Finding the Sema would then unlock the architectural secrets of the Ptolemies and the cult of Alexander, but the greatest prize, the body and the immense treasures of the inner sanctum, would remain lost, relocated to an as-yet unidentified Christian crypt or secular treasury. The most famous example of this kind of movement is the relic transfer that occurred during the Crusades, emphasizing the historical plausibility of Alexander's body being a target for clandestine relocation. The modern search is often complicated by forgeries and hoaxes. Over the centuries, several Alexanders have been claimed and subsequently debunked. In the 1990s, the highly publicized claim by Greek archaeologist Liana Silvaltsi that she had found the tomb in the Siwa oasis proved to be a major distraction, as the inscriptions she claimed to translate were deemed unreliable by the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities. Such highly publicized but ultimately false claims exhaust political capital and diminish public trust, making it harder for reputable archaeologists to secure the necessary permits and funding for deep, intrusive work in the sensitive urban core of Alexandria. The very fame of Alexander acts as a magnet for sensation, requiring modern researchers to proceed with unprecedented caution and transparency. Thus, the quest for the lost tomb is a unique battle against time, urban density, and historical deception. The final solution is likely sealed within a subterranean vault, protected not by a curse, but by the sheer, overwhelming weight of the city built atop it. The discovery will not just be an archaeological event, it will be a pivotal moment that forces us to reconcile myth with history and to confront the final, silent resting place of the man who sought to conquer the entire world. The intense focus on Alexandria's urban core has led to a fascinating, yet often overlooked, study of the city's subterranean architecture. Ancient Alexandria, built on a narrow isthmus and low-lying land, required extensive hydrological engineering, leading to a sprawling network of cisterns, aqueducts, and drainage tunnels. This infrastructure, dating from the Ptolemaic and Roman periods, is what currently complicates and, paradoxically, assists the search for the Sema.
archaeologists must meticulously differentiate between massive, utilitarian Roman-era waterworks and monumental royal funerary complexes. The discovery of a deep, vaulted, non-utilitarian chamber, distinct from the standardized dimensions of public cisterns, is the ultimate target. The sheer scale of the Ptolemaic project to house Alexander's body suggests that the Sema was designed with unparalleled structural integrity to protect the city's most vital asset. It is plausible that the complex incorporated advanced engineering techniques, such as hydraulic cement or massive buttressing, designed to resist the seismic activity known to plague the Nile Delta. If this is the case, the ruins of the Sema, though potentially buried deep, may still maintain a discernible structural footprint that would stand out in GPR surveys when compared to the surrounding, more fragile domestic and commercial ruins. This search for high-integrity, anomalous structures requires collaboration between archaeologists and seismic engineers. The enduring power of Alexander's image is further highlighted by the history of relics and commemorative artifacts found across the Mediterranean. While the body's location is a mystery, small relics associated with the cult of Alexander, coins depicting his divine image, busts, and fragments of inscriptions related to his worship, are found far and wide. These artifacts confirm the sustained, widespread veneration of Alexander long after the tomb's location was lost. The discovery of any significant cache of these materials in situ, within the presumed royal quarter, would act as a powerful confirmation marker, indicating proximity to the Sema, even if the main structure remains inaccessible. The scattered evidence collectively forms a compelling perimeter for the search. The modern quest for the Sema is therefore less a linear excavation and more a multi-dimensional forensic investigation. It requires the patient tracing of ancient street plans, the careful filtering of GPR data against the known subterranean water networks, and the judicious interpretation of fragmented historical accounts. The successful recovery of the tomb would not only complete the biography of one of the world's most influential figures, but would also unlock an unparalleled archaeological time capsule, offering direct insight into the political, religious, and engineering peak of the Hellenistic age in Alexandria.
The final, tantalizing possibility that archaeologists must confront is the theory of deliberate disinformation and decoy tombs. In the highly volatile political climate of the Diadochi, the possession of Alexander's body was a matter of life and death for Ptolemy I Soter. It is entirely plausible that Ptolemy, anticipating attempts to steal the body back or destroy the tomb, authorized the construction of multiple decoy Soma structures within the vast royal quarter of Alexandria. These false tombs, richly decorated but empty or containing substitute bodies, perhaps high-ranking officials, would have served to confuse rival intelligence and satisfy early Roman curiosity, effectively burying the true location in a web of architectural deception. The accounts of later visitors and Arab travelers, often vague and contradictory, might actually be references to these very decoys. This theory suggests that the true Soma, containing the real body, would have been the smallest and most heavily secured, perhaps camouflaged as a non-royal structure or buried deeper than any other. Its humble exterior would have been its greatest protection. This radically shifts the archaeological search away from monumental surface ruins and toward anomalies that defy architectural expectation. A small, deep, highly reinforced chamber in an unexpected corner of the Ptolemaion. This level of deception highlights the extreme lengths the Ptolemies were willing to go to secure their founder's divine relic. The historical accounts of the golden sarcophagus being melted down by Ptolemy X, Lathyrus, around 100 BC also introduced the question of the body's stability.
The original golden coffin would have offered superior environmental protection. The subsequent transfer to a glass or alabaster sarcophagus, while maintaining the visual cult, would have exposed the preserved remains to greater fluctuations in temperature and humidity, accelerating the natural processes of decay, especially in the humid climate of Alexandria. If the body was exposed to seawater or prolonged dampness after the 4th century earthquakes, it is likely that the soft tissues would have dissolved, leaving only the skeleton, or perhaps even less, to be found. The continuing quest, therefore, is a profound confrontation with the limits of historical recovery. The tomb of Alexander the Great is not just an archaeological challenge, it is a philosophical test of whether the greatest symbols of history can ever truly be reclaimed from the chaotic processes of war, faith, time, and urban development. The ultimate reward is not simply the body, but the reconciliation of the magnificent, semi-divine image of Alexander with the physical reality of his final, silent resting place, wherever that may be concealed. The search itself has become the final, most enduring legacy of the conqueror.
The ongoing quest to locate Alexander's tomb necessitates a deep dive into the socioeconomic geography of ancient Alexandria. The royal quarter, where the Sema was undoubtedly located, was the pinnacle of wealth, power, and infrastructure. Understanding the hydraulic systems and the land use patterns of this specific area is key. The city planners of the Ptolemaic period were meticulous. Every major building served a function and was oriented according to the established Greek Hippodamian grid system. The Sema's location, likely at a prominent intersection or square, would have dictated its size and external visibility. Contemporary accounts describe it as a peripteral structure, meaning it had columns surrounding the main cella, similar to Greek temples, emphasizing its role as a visible monument of Hellenistic power. A specific, localized theory focuses on the crypt. The royal quarter contained not just the Sema, but the tombs of the Ptolemies. While the Ptolemies initially sought burial near Alexander, some accounts suggest that due to overcrowding or political changes, subsequent generations were interred in a communal yet highly secure vault called the crypta. It is entirely plausible that during a period of extreme civil unrest or danger, such as the massive earthquake of 365 AD, the priests made the critical decision to relocate Alexander's remains from the exposed Sema structure and place them securely inside the crypta to protect them from both looters and destruction. If so, the crypta itself, a colossal structure yet to be precisely located, becomes the new target. This maneuver would perfectly explain why the tomb disappeared after the 4th century AD, as the body would be hidden within a larger, less identifiable communal burial complex. The investigation is further aided by historical analyses of imperial coinage and portraiture. The image of Alexander, often idealized or depicted with the attributes of a god, example the ram's horns of Amun, was stamped onto Ptolemaic and early Roman coinage. The quality and style of these portraits changed over time, reflecting the evolving cult of the king. A discovery of the unlooted Sema would yield not only the body, but potentially a unique, uncorrupted collection of artifacts, statuary, and painted portraits directly associated with the deification process. Scientific analysis of any such artifacts could provide an unparalleled understanding of how Alexander's physical appearance was translated into the propaganda of divinity, offering a true likeness of the conqueror versus his idealized godlike image. The sheer scale of the logistical problems in modern Alexandria, excavating through meters of modern concrete and navigating the water table beneath mosques and homes, means that the eventual success in finding the Sema will be credited as much to political diplomacy and engineering innovation as it will to archaeological skill. The tomb remains one of the world's greatest time capsules, demanding not only a shovel, but a profound respect for the layers of history, both ancient and modern, that guard its secrets.
The enduring viability of the search relies heavily on the geological stability of the proposed burial sites in ancient Alexandria. While the region is seismically active and the 365 AD earthquake was devastating, monumental structures often utilize deeper, more stable foundations than domestic buildings. The Sema, being a structure designed to last millennia and hold a deified king, would have been constructed with immense megalithic stone blocks sunk deep into the bedrock, potentially surviving the subsequent collapse of the lighter upper layers of the city. The stone types used, likely hard, durable marbles or high-quality limestone imported from Greece or Upper Egypt, would also be distinctly non-local to the soft, sandy delta soil, making their detection via density analysis and seismic surveys a promising avenue. A key element in the modern archaeological strategy is the concept of accidental discovery. Given the political and logistical roadblocks to a planned, large-scale royal quarter excavation, the most likely scenario involves the tomb's discovery during a massive non-archaeological civic project, such as the construction of a subway line, a large underground garage, or a new municipal drainage system. These massive public works require deep digging and extensive subsurface mapping, often inadvertently exposing major ancient structures. Should such a discovery occur, the rapid response and identification protocols must be immediate and flawless to prevent damage or looting before professional archaeologists can secure the site. The sheer depth required for the Sema's location, potentially 15 to 25 meters below the modern surface, means only these major infrastructure projects typically reach the necessary historical layer. The psychological impact of the tomb's continued absence on historical studies is profound. The final chapter of Alexander's life is literally missing. We have meticulously documented the rise and fall of his empire, his battles, and his politics, yet the physical reality of his end remains a void. This absence creates an academic restlessness, ensuring that the hunt for the Sema remains a top-tier goal for Hellenistic scholars. The discovery would not only confirm his burial location, but would provide a final, tangible cultural bridge between the classical Greek world and the dawn of the Roman Empire, a period of transition that Alexander's body uniquely spans. The artifacts found within would offer a direct physical link to the man himself, moving beyond the idealized busts and fragmented historical texts. The ultimate significance of the lost tomb is that it symbolizes history's most valuable time capsule. It represents the precise intersection where Macedonian military genius, Egyptian divinity, and Hellenistic political theater converged. The solid, deep foundations of the Sema awaiting discovery are the final, magnificent testimony to the conqueror whose memory continues to dominate the narrative of the ancient world. The question is not if it survived the earthquakes and the religious purges, but where it awaits the technology and determination to bring it into the modern light.
The continued archaeological failure to locate the Sema has led some researchers to investigate the oral histories and folklore that persisted in Alexandria long after the written accounts ceased. These local legends, often dismissed by early European archaeologists as unreliable, provide a crucial alternative map of the city's ancient sacred landscape. For centuries, Arab and Coptic residents of Alexandria maintained traditions that linked certain hidden crypts, wells, or obscure subterranean passages to the resting place of the king. These stories often contain specific, reproducible details about depth, construction materials, or orientation that were only known to a small segment of the population, suggesting a genuine, unbroken chain of secret knowledge passed down orally. A particularly compelling legend relates to the Well of Alexander. Several historical wells in the modern city have been locally associated with Alexander, not just as sources of water, but as symbolic or literal entry points to the hidden levels of the ancient city. It is plausible that the Sema, designed to be waterproof, might have utilized a deep well or shaft for ventilation, access, or ritualistic drainage. If one of these historically significant wells leads to a complex, sealed hypogeum, it could very well be the tomb's true entryway, which was obscured after the 4th century by simply covering the wellhead. The search, therefore, is not just for a tomb, but for a meticulously concealed access shaft. The historical details surrounding Emperor Septimius Severus's visit gain added significance in this context. His reported removal of the sacred texts and his subsequent sealing of the inner chamber are not just acts of preservation, but acts of information control. By removing the ritual books, Severus ensured that the knowledge of how to properly access and utilize the Sema's potential spiritual power, or simply its mechanisms, was centralized with the Roman state, preventing the secrets from fueling further rebellion or anti-Roman cults. This decision effectively created an information vacuum around the tomb, guaranteeing its disappearance once the Roman system of custodianship eventually collapsed amidst the later empire's chaos. The last people with the full, codified knowledge of the Sema's access were likely the Severan officials, a knowledge that vanished from the public record within a generation or two. The challenge today, therefore, is twofold: to locate the structure itself through advanced geophysical sensing, and simultaneously to deconstruct the layers of intentional secrecy and mythological obfuscation that have guarded the site for nearly 2 millennia. The lost tomb is protected not only by stone and water, but by the silence of the last guardians and the deliberate confusion sown by the early Ptolemies. Its discovery will mark a monumental victory for the meticulous, often thankless work of historical forensics.
The quest for the Sema is intimately linked to the history of ancient cartography and mapping. The layout of ancient Alexandria was meticulously planned by the architect Dinocrates, following the classic Greek orthogonal street grid. While much of this map is now buried, the initial Ptolemaic and Roman-era maps and accounts, particularly those from geographers like Strabo, who visited the city around 25 BC, provide invaluable, though fragmented, spatial data. Strabo described the royal quarter, Bruchium, as occupying a significant portion of the city and confirmed that the Sema was a major landmark located within it. Modern researchers utilize Geographic Information Systems, GIS, to overlay these fragmented historical map details onto modern satellite and GPR data, allowing them to predict the most probable intersection points for the main axis of the royal quarter, the predicted location of the Sema. One critical piece of historical cartography that influences the search is the Tabula Peutingeriana, a medieval copy of an ancient Roman road map. While not a precise architectural plan, this map confirms the major routes and landmarks of the Roman Empire, including Alexandria. Though highly stylized, the relative placement of key administrative and religious centers on these historical documents helps archaeologists narrow the possible search area to specific, high-status quadrants that are now beneath the densely packed modern city. The reliance on these oblique and stylized historical maps underscores the challenging nature of the task, searching for a geometrically precise structure using evidence that is inherently abstract and incomplete. Furthermore, the underwater archaeology conducted in Alexandria's East Harbor, which covers the submerged parts of the royal quarter,
continues to offer crucial contextual evidence. Frank Gaudio's teams have located colossal submerged statues, sphinxes, and palace foundations, confirming the immense scale and complexity of the Ptolemaion. This provides a baseline for the expected monumentality of the Sema. If the submerged palaces were built with blocks weighing many tons, the land-based Sema, holding the empire's ultimate relic, must have been built with equal, if not greater, structural fortitude. The underwater discoveries thus serve as a valuable control group, validating the theory that the Sema's remnants will be massive and highly detectable, even beneath deep layers of debris and modern concrete. The ultimate success of the search now depends on obtaining political clearance for deep drilling and targeted excavation in the areas identified by GPR as containing major, non-standard structural anomalies. The Gate of the Gods was sealed by myth. Alexander's tomb is sealed by modern urbanity and the geopolitical friction over his legacy. The tomb remains the most significant missing structural piece required to complete the detailed map of ancient Alexandria.
The persistent and often politically charged claims by various nations regarding the custody of Alexander's remains introduce an interesting factor into the modern search: nationalistic archaeology. The pride of Greece, the historical claim of Egypt, and the newer involvement of North Macedonia, with its own competing narrative over Alexander's heritage, create an atmosphere where any definitive discovery would instantly become a geopolitical event. This pressure contributes to the intense secrecy maintained by the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, or SCA, regarding any promising GPR anomalies found beneath Alexandria. The SCA understands that releasing prematurely verified data could trigger an international legal and custodial battle far more complex than the archaeological challenge itself. The question of authenticating the remains is also a major scientific hurdle. If a body, or even fragmented remains, is found within a monumental tomb structure in the predicted location, absolute confirmation would require mitochondrial DNA analysis, mtDNA. This would necessitate comparing the DNA extracted from the remains with that of a known authenticated relative of Alexander. While some of his immediate family members, like his father, Philip II, were identified in the tombs at Vergina, the mtDNA lineage can be traced only through the maternal line. The challenge is acquiring a verifiable maternal reference sample from Alexander's lineage, which would require the exhumation of remains belonging to his mother, Olympias, or another maternal relative, a complex and ethically fraught undertaking. Without a DNA match, the identification would rely solely on funerary context, iconography, and historical accounts, which, while powerful, lack the modern scientific certainty demanded by such a monumental discovery. The financial and logistical cost of the discovery is staggering. Estimates for a full, deep-level excavation in the sensitive urban core, including necessary shoring, dewatering, and temporary relocation of modern buildings, run into the tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars. Such a project would require a consortium of international funding, likely necessitating UNESCO involvement and a binding agreement on the final disposition of the artifacts and the body. The sheer economic barrier acts as a final modern-day successor to the diadochi, limiting the search primarily to non-invasive, low-cost surveys rather than the intrusive deep digging that will ultimately be required. The continued absence of Alexander's tomb, therefore, serves as a powerful reminder of the fragility of historical memory and the limits of modern technology against the combined forces of time and human conflict. The Sema is the final, magnificent prize of Hellenistic archaeology, a sealed record waiting for a moment of political consensus and technological perfection to be revealed. Until then, the greatest conqueror in history remains, ironically, completely concealed by the legacy of the civilization he founded.
The search for the Sema has recently incorporated a more rigorous analysis of Alexandrian seismology and geological data. The Nile Delta region is characterized by high levels of soil liquefaction and subsidence. especially when subjected to major seismic events, such as the devastating 4th century earthquakes. A key hypothesis suggests that the tomb complex, while perhaps surviving the initial quake, was buried under successive layers of collapsing structures and then effectively preserved by the anaerobic conditions created by the rising water table and siltation. This phenomenon, which has protected shipwrecks and wooden artifacts in the submerged harbor, might also have encased the deep foundations of the Sema. This protection, while preserving the structure, also makes it exceptionally difficult to access, as the surrounding soil acts like a dense, unstable cement. This geological reality strongly favors the theory of the body remaining in Alexandria, sealed within a deep hypogeum designed to resist water intrusion. The Ptolemaic engineers, acutely aware of the delta's instability, would have likely utilized methods derived from earlier Egyptian construction to create an almost indestructible burial vault. The modern search must therefore employ specialized seismic reflection surveys to detect variations in soil density and structure that indicate massive, subterranean, non-natural stone formations, the telltale signature of an engineered tomb designed for eternity. The cultural significance of the heroic cult in the ancient Greek world also provides a functional clue. A heroine was not just a tomb, it was a site where the deceased hero's spirit was believed to remain active and capable of providing aid or protection to the community. The constant public viewing of Alexander's body in the Sema was essential because it maintained the tangible connection to this powerful, protective spirit. The sealing of the tomb by Septimius Severus therefore not only protected the body, but also symbolically severed the public's direct access to Alexander's heroic power, marking a transition point in the city's spiritual reliance away from the pagan hero king and toward the rising Christian figures. In essence, the lost tomb of Alexander the Great is an unparalleled archaeological black hole. It is a major, historically documented structural anomaly that simply vanished. The relentless search, fueled by the conqueror's enduring fame, requires a radical collaboration between historians, geologists, and civil engineers, using 21st-century technology to navigate the 2 millennia of deliberate obfuscation and catastrophic natural forces that guard the final resting place of one of history's most pivotal figures.
The historical record suggests that the ultimate disappearance of the Sema may be linked to the changing economic fortunes of Alexandria in the later Roman and Byzantine periods. As the city's power and wealth waned, the ability to maintain colossal structures and their security diminished. The elaborate system of lighting, maintenance, and priestly attendance required to sustain the public viewing of Alexander's body would have become prohibitively expensive. The body's transfer from the gold to the glass sarcophagus was already an early indicator of financial strain. It is plausible that, rather than being violently destroyed or stolen, the Sema complex simply became economically untenable, leading to its gradual neglect, functional sealing, and subsequent burial beneath accumulated urban refuse and debris. This theory implies that the tomb was not violently attacked, but peacefully retired from public life. The priesthood, realizing they could no longer afford the cult, may have respectfully sealed the inner chamber, allowing the elements and time to do the rest. This passive destruction would result in a structure that is still largely intact but completely covered and forgotten by the common populace, only to be remembered in vague local legends. This scenario significantly increases the odds of finding the tomb's contents preserved, a massive, deep-level mausoleum that simply surrendered to the rising water and encroaching soil, taking its priceless secrets with it. The ongoing search must also factor in the precise material components of the Sema. Analysis of Ptolemaic funerary practices suggests the use of limestone and marble for the visible architecture, but the deeper, inner burial chambers often utilized granite or diorite for their durability and spiritual significance. as seen in earlier pharaonic tombs. The presence of these much denser, non-local stone types deep beneath the alluvial soil of Alexandria would provide an unmistakable signature in high-resolution GPR and magnetic surveys, locating a high-density geometric anomaly that corresponds to the known size of a Macedonian royal tomb, roughly 20 by 20 meters, and is composed of these imported, durable materials, would be the most convincing physical evidence short of excavation. The challenge of the lost tomb is thus a multidisciplinary battle against obscurity, entropy, and budget. The great conqueror, who spent his life in the blazing light of military glory and divine worship, found his ultimate protection in the silent, suffocating darkness beneath the city that bears his name. The search continues to be a magnificent testament to the enduring power of history, compelling us to use every modern tool available to pry open the final, magnificent seal of the Hellenistic world.
The geopolitical importance of the tomb's location in Alexandria is emphasized by the city's role as a major ancient intellectual center. The Sema was not only a royal burial, but was strategically located near the Mosaion, or museum, which housed the famous Library of Alexandria. This proximity suggests a deliberate connection. The tomb was placed at the heart of the city's intellectual and spiritual power complex. The Mosaion was the center of Hellenistic learning, where scholars and sages gathered. By placing Alexander's body nearby, Ptolemy linked the conqueror's glory directly to the city's academic prestige. This location implies that the inner sanctum of the Sema, which Severus sealed, may have contained not just political records, but also crucial historical and philosophical texts related to Alexander's campaigns or the Pythagorean or Aristotelian philosophical traditions he inherited. The search for the Sema is made more complicated by the very nature of the Brocium, the royal quarter. This area was not a static neighborhood, but a dynamic, evolving space where palaces, temples, and tombs were constantly being rebuilt or modified over 3 centuries of Ptolemaic rule. This means the location of the Sema might have been shifted or reintegrated into new royal structures multiple times before the Roman period. Modern archaeology must therefore search for evidence of a complex sequence of construction, destruction, and reburial rather than a single fixed point. The overlapping foundations and disparate construction styles beneath the modern city could easily mask the true Sema, making it indistinguishable from a dozen other minor royal or noble burials. One compelling, though highly speculative theory involves the Great Fire of Alexandria. While the burning of the Great Library is widely known, the city suffered numerous devastating fires. A large fire in the royal quarter could have consumed the lighter upper structure of the Sema, causing the roof and internal wooden elements to collapse into the deep foundation chambers. This sudden, massive structural collapse, followed by the rising water table and siltation, would have effectively sealed and preserved the lower burial chamber, providing both a mechanism for destruction and a condition for preservation. The search for evidence of a massive fire layer directly overlying a monumental tomb structure in the predicted location could provide the necessary context to confirm the Sema's identity. Ultimately, the failure to recover the tomb reflects the success of 2 millennia of geological and human obfuscation. The final secrets of Alexander the Great are held hostage by the urban complexity of the modern world, a complexity that is the very legacy of the empire he founded. The search is a continuous, high-stakes forensic investigation, demanding technology and patience to peel back the layers of history, one geological stratum at a time. The final, tantalizing possibility regarding the missing tomb centers on the concept of sacred displacement and the role of St. Mark the Evangelist in Alexandria. St. Mark is the traditional founder of the Coptic Church in Egypt, and his relics were housed in Alexandria before their famous theft by Venetian merchants in 828 AD. The long-standing theory, known as the Venetian theory, suggests that in the period of intense anti-pagan fervor and destruction during the 4th and 5th centuries, the local Christian authorities, realizing the immense cultural value and historical significance of the Soma, chose to relocate Alexander's remains to the site of St. Mark's tomb. By burying Alexander near or beneath the relics of a newly important Christian figure, they effectively co-opted the pagan king's divine aura and ensured the physical security of the remains, masking the tomb's true identity under the umbrella of Christian sanctity. If this relocation occurred, the search for Alexander's body becomes the search for the original pre-828 AD tomb of St. Mark in Alexandria. This Christian burial site would have inherited the architectural protection and secrecy protocols of the pagan Sema. The Venetians, when they stole what they believed to be St. Mark's body, may have inadvertently stolen Alexander's, or perhaps, realizing the significance of what they found, they deliberately fueled the confusion between the two figures. This theory offers a plausible mechanism for the tomb's sudden and complete disappearance from the historical record, as the most sacred pagan relic was successfully absorbed into the new dominant religion. The archaeological imperative created by this theory is clear. Investigate the traditional and documented sites of St. Mark's original burial in Alexandria. Although the current St. Mark's Coptic Cathedral stands in the city, its foundations and associated crypts are a complex maze of centuries of construction. Finding a deep, non-standard hypogeum beneath or near the cathedral site that exhibits Ptolemaic architectural characteristics, such as the distinctive imported stone or high-integrity construction, could prove the link. The structural analysis of the foundations of the older religious buildings in the area is thus a critical yet highly sensitive phase of the ongoing search. Ultimately, the lost tomb of Alexander the Great is protected by a profound, multi-layered enigma, a political secret concealed by a religious transformation. The tomb is not merely a geographical location, but a historical battleground between Hellenistic glory and Christian ascendancy.
The final analysis of the lost tomb must account for the concept of architectural recycling, the common practice in antiquity of dismantling older structures to use the valuable, high-quality materials for new constructions. Following the devastating earthquakes and the rise of Christianity, the magnificent Soma, a pagan monument, would have been seen by Byzantine builders as a quarry of readily available imported marble, limestone, and granite. It is highly probable that the visible above-ground structure of the Soma was systematically demolished and recycled into churches, fortification walls, or other major civic buildings during the 4th and 5th centuries AD. This process would explain the total disappearance of the monument from the historical record, leaving behind only the lowest, most robust foundation layers, the very layers that GPR surveys are now trying to locate. If this recycling theory holds true, the search is no longer for the intact Soma, but for the unreachable foundations and the deep inner crypt. The outer walls and column drums of the Soma might be scattered across the modern city, embedded in the foundations of later structures, meaning the search requires a subtle, forensic study of the stone types and masonry styles used in existing Byzantine and early Arab architecture in Alexandria. Identifying large quantities of high-quality, non-local Macedonian or Upper Egyptian stone in later buildings that correlates with the estimated dimensions of the Soma could point toward the origin of the material, narrowing down the original location of the quarry site. The spiritual magnetism of the area around the presumed royal quarter further complicates matters. The continuing power of the site, even after the Soma vanished, suggests that the indigenous populations continued to venerate the general area, even if they forgot the precise location of the tomb. The creation of shrines or the misidentification of existing tombs, like the Nebi Daniel example, are symptomatic of this residual spiritual energy. The missing tomb acts as a vortex of cultural memory, drawing endless speculation and pilgrimage, ensuring that Alexander's final resting place remains the most important yet least tangible piece of the ancient landscape. The ultimate significance of the 2,000-year quest for the lost tomb is its capacity to illuminate the profound forces that shape human history: political ambition, religious zealotry, and geological catastrophe. The body of Alexander the Great, which once commanded the attention of the entire known world, is now protected by the silent collusion of these forces, waiting for the precise moment when technology and political will align to lift the veil of history and complete the most enduring biography ever written. The epic conclusion, the immortal king's final victory. And so our quest concludes, not with the recovery of the Sema, the magnificent stone monument, but with the profound realization of where Alexander's true legacy resides. For over 2 millennia, his physical remains have been the object of ambition, a symbol of divinity, a prize for looters, and a secret guarded by the very earth itself. The body that conquered the known world has, in its disappearance, achieved its ultimate spiritual victory. Those who stole him, those who protected him, those who sealed him, and those who inadvertently buried him have all played their part in creating the greatest archaeological enigma of all time. We realize now that the tomb is no longer merely a building, it is the missing memory of our civilization.
The sheer, monumental effort of the early Ptolemies to entomb Alexander speaks volumes. They did not just bury a king, they engineered a time capsule designed to withstand the collapse of empires and the ravages of nature. We can still visualize the dazzling spectacle witnessed by Roman emperors, the preserved, unblemished face of the conqueror, visible through a crystalline sarcophagus, surrounded by untold riches, and illuminated by a cult that deemed him the son of Zeus Ammon. That vision, that singular image of physical immortality, is what fuels the search today. It is the hope that beneath the unstable, waterlogged foundations of modern Alexandria, a subterranean hypogeum, constructed with cyclopean blocks of granite and sealed by the chaos of the 4th century earthquakes, still awaits, holding not just a body, but the entire unlooted archive of the Hellenistic Golden Age. Imagine the moment of discovery. The ground-penetrating radar confirms the unique, dense structure. The water is successfully pumped out. Engineers descend through a forgotten shaft and breach a massive, sealed limestone door. They enter the air of the 3rd century AD, air that has been still for 17 centuries. The chamber is revealed, not destroyed, but perfectly preserved by the seal of Severus and the silt of the Nile. Inside, the alabaster sarcophagus lies, perhaps cracked, but intact. Beside it, the unimaginable treasures, the personal armor of Alexander, his royal diadem, and the sealed scrolls, the lost philosophical treatises, the detailed, unedited accounts of his campaigns, and the spiritual texts of the Serapis cult. The silence of the chamber is the sound of history, finally speaking its last, greatest truth. The true importance of this vault is that it offers the key to reconciling the mythical Alexander with the historical man. It would resolve the ambiguity of his death, allow us to see his true, unidealized likeness, and grant us a direct, tangible link to the individual who, at the age of 32, permanently redrew the cultural map of the world. But perhaps the most powerful lesson is the one Alexander himself understood. The greatest power is the enduring idea. While his physical remains are hidden, his cultural spirit reigns supreme. His tomb vanished, but his language, his philosophy, his urban planning, and his vision of a united, globalized world persisted, creating the very foundations of the Roman, Byzantine, and even the modern Western world.
His disappearance was not a defeat. It was his ultimate strategic triumph over entropy. By taking his body out of the public domain, he forced the world to worship not the man, but the immortal ideal, the conqueror who transcended death itself. We continue to search, not just for the Sema, but for the final answer to the question he posed to the ancient world: can a man become a god? We have spent 2,000 years looking for a door to the past buried deep beneath the earth. Now, as we conclude our search, we embrace the final, beautiful paradox. Alexander, the man who yearned for immortality, has achieved it through the very mystery of his burial. He forced the modern world into a perpetual quest, ensuring that his name is spoken, his story is debated, and his legacy is revered every single day. The true genius of Alexander's burial is that the uncertainty of his location guarantees his eternal presence. The search for the tomb is not over. It has merely become the final, most magnificent chapter of his epic life. For the world he left behind to conquer has become the one thing he commanded us to do: never stop looking.